On the February 23rd main event, that same show with Buster Douglas, Warrior is wrestling Earthquake, and Earthquake goes to jump off the second rope on him, but Hogan comes out and makes the save. A few weeks later on Superstars, Hogan is now wrestling Earthquake, and Earthquake hits him with the Earthquake squash, and the Warrior comes out and took Earthquake out. And then he and Hogan got into a confrontation of their own. Warrior starts to hit the ropes, and Hogan turned his back and starts to leave the ring, and Warrior raised his arm like he was going to clothesline him from behind, but Hogan turned him around, and they had a face-off. So again, Warrior's kind of teasing, at least to me, a little bit of a heel turn. We mentioned earlier that Savage did a phenomenal job promoting this main event show on Arsenio, and now it's Warrior's turn. So he actually makes an appearance on Arsenio on March 21st, and he's in to promote WrestleMania. We all know how well Hogan and Savage do at stuff like this, but Bruce, how do you think that Warrior did here?
I thought he was the shits. And the reason being is that Savage and Hulk, as human beings, outside of their characters, are pretty good guys. And they're personable, they're engaging, they have a great personality, and they could chat and make conversation with just about anybody and make it entertaining. Warrior was very difficult to have a conversation with, like a normal human being. And to put him in that environment where he wasn't doing those off-the-wall promos took him out of his element, and he was uncomfortable, and I don't think that he came off very well at all. That's just my opinion. I don't mean to shit on him.
Well, you did.
I just didn't think he was very good.
Oh my God. This is the first and only time that Hogan ever challenged for the Intercontinental title, even though you said he wasn't. We all thought he was.
Champion versus champion, title versus title. Yeah.
Was there not any concern that this is sort of kind of giving away the finish of the match, since it's obvious that if Hogan wins, he has to forfeit the Intercontinental title?
Well, they both had to forfeit the Intercontinental title, I guess.
But why would you, why challenge for something if you're just going to give it away?
He's not challenging for the Intercontinental title, goddammit. It's champion versus champion.
We talked about in our NWO and the WWE show how there was a lot of surprise with how all the fans got behind Hogan in this match against Rock at Mania 18. Did you guys have any sort of concern that one of these guys would be booed in the live crowd? Or did you think that they'd both be over strong enough where the crowd wouldn't necessarily shit on it?
Sure. They had to pick them. You had to pick your favorite. And when you pick your favorite, the chances are you're going to boo the other guy. So you run that risk because somebody's not going to be happy when the Hulkster loses. Vice versa, they're not going to be happy when the Warrior loses. So it's risky.
Let's get to the match. Warrior comes out first, and he runs to the ring, which is his normal routine. And Warrior said in a WWE release that he didn't want to ride in the cart, and he told someone in the office that he wasn't doing it. They tried to say, no, you have to. And he said, fuck it, I'm not doing it. And Vince agreed with Warrior. Do you have any memories of this sort of back and forth debate about whether or not to use the cart?
Vince had them both walk into the ring on their own. Vince had them both not using the cart from the start. So that's my recollection of it. There was never any intent. There was never any pitch from day one that either of those guys were going to go down in carts.
I need you to explain this line for me that Gorilla Monsoon used quite often, and he used it here too. The irresistible force meeting the immovable object.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
What the fuck is that?
That's kind of like steel hitting steel, I guess. Gorilla had a lot of those. Gorilla, man, I was listening, he had a lot of lines. I should have written them down because some of them were just doozies. That he would bury the baby faces without even meaning to. But Gino was Gino. When they talked about they make the announcement for the house, and Gorilla says, I don't know, Jess. They say it's 65,000. I think it could be maybe even 66,000. Gino, they just announced the fucking attendance.
At 67.
Yeah, whatever it is. But he increased it. Madison Square Garden holds 18,000 people. We got 23,000 and 28,000 plus here in the Garden tonight. Every time it would get bigger and just be the real number's impressive enough.
The real number that you say or the real number that Meltzer says?
Fuck Meltzer.
Bruce, we've got to talk about this. Somewhere early in the match, the guys do a test of strength. And Warrior loses and goes down to his knees, and he had his head in front of Hogan's crotch, and he starts shaking his head kind of left and right like, no, I'm not giving up. And his hair is shaking around, and we can't see this from the front. We see it from the other angle. It's everywhere online. I know you know what I'm talking about. What was the reaction from the boys when they see this? It has to be well received.
He should blow him while he's down there. A better case. Fuck it. About what you'd expect.
Somewhere in the match, Hogan goes to the outside selling a knee injury, and Gorilla calls it, quote, a temporary dislocation of the patella tendon. This comes on the heels of Sting suffering that knee injury. This is certainly a rib.
Oh, my God. Did Sting dislocated his patella? What, he that's a rib that Sting's pulling because Gorilla says that 9 million times during any television show? Gorilla always said that kind of shit.
They end up having a match beyond all expectations here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, and this is probably, in my opinion, Warrior's greatest performance ever.
You think this, even over his WrestleMania 7 match with Savage?
That was probably his second best. I think this was his best.
Of course, the Warrior pins Hogan after about 22 minutes. Hogan misses the leg drop, and Warrior hits him with a splash and gets the 1-2-3. Somebody told me, Bruce, and I call bullshit on this. Is this the first time Hogan's been pinned clean since 81? They said back then he was working as a heel and Tony Atlas pinned him, but this is the first time he was pinned clean in like 9 years. Do you understand that to be the case?
No, I don't think so, because he worked in AWA, he worked in Japan all that time, and working programs with Bockwinkel, and I don't know if it is or not, but I highly doubt it.
Did you, there's lots of rumor and innuendo here that Hogan kicks out at 3.5, 3.25. Is that Hogan being a dick? That's what people would have you believe online.
Why is that being a dick? Kicking out too late.
I don't know. A lot of people
you're in a match. You're trying to kick out.
Did Warrior fly to Hogan in Tampa to practice this match the week prior?
Yeah, they were in Tampa. Yes, I'm trying to think out where the hell they were. We got them together in Stamford first, and then I think the week before they were down in Tampa.
Who's the agent who puts this together, Pat?
Yeah.
Pat Patterson has said that both he and Vince went out into the arena to watch the match, and when Hogan was pinned, they both had tears in their eyes. It was emotional backstage, to say the least, according to Pat. Did everybody kind of have that feeling seeing Hogan pass the torch, that this was the end of an era, so to speak, and it was out of appreciation for what Hogan had done that people were shedding these tears?
It was very emotional because Hulk had been the man, and he had been the guy that had been carrying the company on his back for so long, and you're kind of seeing the end of an era. And I thought that he did it the right way, and the way that he did the job and everything that he did. So, yeah, it was emotional when you're so much a part of that, to watch the guys and you know how much it means to them. Sure, very emotional. I think that there were a lot of people that felt that way.
Pat Patterson tells a story of no one being able to find the Warrior backstage after the match, and then he eventually found him in a broom closet crying alone. He was so happy to have accomplished this. Have you heard that story?
Yeah, I have, and Pat finding him, and he was very emotional. One of the only times I've ever seen Warrior emotional.
Let's talk about post-match for a minute. It's been debated forever After the match, Hebner gives Warrior both belts, but Warrior gives the world title back and chooses to just pose with the yellow IC for a minute. By the way, it's worth mentioning, a fan in the Bronx owns that yellow Intercontinental belt. He bought it from Warrior years ago. Anyway, Hogan comes in and gets the world title from Hebner and gives it to Warrior himself. And Warrior giving the belt back to Hebner makes me think this was the plan all along, to have this belt presentation from Hogan handing it to Warrior. Do you know if the office approved that, or is this something Hogan would tell Warrior to do on his own?
Well, no, Hebner wasn't supposed to give him both belts. Hogan was supposed to get out and get the world belt and give it to Warrior.
That's the plan from the office.
Yeah.
Hogan had this to say in his book. Also, he had an interesting mystique about him. He talked about the mighty warriors in heaven and stuff like that. He had a pretty good rap, but when he got in the ring after he ran in and shook the ropes and stuff, he had no game. He had no wrestling psychology, and that's what it's all about, creating emotion. Great guy, nice guy, but really just a flash in the pan. Vince McMahon wanted Ultimate Warrior to beat me for the belt. I didn't agree with him. I didn't think this guy could carry the load. Then again, maybe I didn't give Vince a choice in the matter. By that time, my mind wasn't really focused on wrestling the way it should have been. 7 years of carrying the load as the main guy had taken its toll on me. I was tired, and I was starting to get hurt a lot. I was beat. I should have told Vince I needed a break. I should have said, hey, I'm hurt. Everybody else took time off. I should have looked in the mirror and said, hey, man, you're human. You can only push yourself so far. Instead, I kept wrestling. And the more it ground on me, the more my attitude started to suck. So when Vince wanted to hand the title to Ultimate Warrior, it was because he could see that down the road to a time when he might not be able to depend on Hulkamania and need to switch gears. I agreed that I would lose the belt to the Ultimate Warrior, but I made sure we had one hell of a match. Just when it looked like it was over, I kicked out of his finish. Then I pinned him, and he kicked out of my finish. At the end of the night, the referee was supposed to get the belt from the timekeeper and give it to the Ultimate Warrior. But this was my chance to steal back everything that he had just gotten from me. So I zipped over to the timekeeper and ripped the belt out of his hand. Then I walked to the ring apron with the belt, looked to God, shook my head yes, walked into the ring, and handed the Ultimate Warrior the belt. As I left the arena, 68,000 people in the Sky Dome watched me go. Ultimate Warrior held the belt over his head in victory, and no one cared. It turned out I was right about Ultimate Warrior. He couldn't carry the load as heavyweight champion, not the way Hulk Hogan had. Vince's attempt to move in a different direction hadn't been the success he'd hoped it'd be. Your thoughts?
Well, as far as the belt handing off at the end, there was always a plan for Hulk to go out and get the belt and present it to the Warrior. And that's what we discussed in the production meeting. That's what we all had laid out. So that was the plan. I mean, the plan was to give Hulk rest and to get him some time off and to bring him back and do the angle with Earthquake. So Hulk's got his version, and that's what it is. He's the Hulkster.
When he's leaving on the ring cart, the camera's shooting him a lot.
Yeah.
On his ride back.
We're telling the story about the immortal Hulk Hogan, and that's where we christened him the Immortal.
That is when Jesse Ventura has a line that says something like, I do believe Hulkamania will live forever. That's right. That's a pre-scripted line, not Jesse freestyling.
Yep.
Allegedly, after the pay-per-view, Hogan was in the limo with Vince and others, but didn't say a word during the drive. Were you in the limo with him, or did you hear about what went on inside of the limo, or can you poke holes in that rumor and innuendo?
Well, we were all staying in the Sky Dome Hotel, which was an elevator ride up.
So there's no limo?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
We were in the Sky Dome Hotel. It was an elevator down, and we took a service elevator that got us into the Sky Dome itself.
Did they have the WrestleMania after party in 1990, or is that not a thing yet?
No.
So what does everybody do? So after the show, everybody's finished, and you're getting on this service elevator. Everybody just goes to the room and goes to bed?
No, I go to the bar in the hotel.
Was Hogan in the bar at the hotel?
God, I don't remember.
Was Warrior?
Probably not. Warrior didn't. That wasn't his bag.
What's the general feeling amongst the boys at the bar afterwards? Goddamn, I hope it works.
It's a high after a big show. I think there were a lot of doubters thinking that Warrior wouldn't be able to carry the ball. There was concern before WrestleMania whether or not he'd be able to carry the ball. So, everybody is going to want to tear you down as soon as you get put on the pedestal. Everybody's trying to knock you down. So I'm sure there was a lot of second guessing. But for the most part, you're coming off of a high. You're coming off of a big show. Man, have a drink, smoke a joint, have a good time.
Do you remember any of the boys or any of the office armchair quarterbacking the decision at the bar afterwards?
Not that I remember, no.
Do you remember there being any debate the day of the show with anyone in the office as to whether or not this was the right decision?
The only person that I really remember having issue with it and speaking to Vince directly about it was Ted DiBiase. And there might have been other guys that felt that Warrior just wasn't the guy and wouldn't be able to carry the championship the way Vince thought he could, and felt that Vince saw something else in the Warrior and that other people didn't see what Vince saw, put it that way.
What do you say to the folks who wanted a rematch? Why was there never a rematch in the WWF? I mean, we got one in WCW, and we all wish we could forget that, but why do you think it never happened here?
Well, monetarily wise, it wasn't a huge success. It didn't do as well as the previous year with Randy and Hulk. So I think Vince learned his lesson at that point, not really wanting to put two baby faces in the ring. The next time that we came close to that was Steve and Rock years later.
Let's talk about that. WrestleMania VI did a $3.5 million gate, and it did like a 3.8% buy rate, which is down from 5.9% the year before. But it's still well ahead of what you guys would do at 7 at 2.8. So let's break down the numbers. That means WrestleMania VI did 560,000 buys, and that's down from 767,000 buys for WrestleMania V. So you could certainly see a downward trend by more than 200,000 buys. But they would even lose an additional 160 from 6 to 7, because 7 only comes in at 400. I take it that you would believe that Vince thought that the number was a disappointment and didn't meet expectations financially?
It was a disappointment in comparison to the previous year, yeah.
Well, but I mean,
you take your two biggest stars and you put them against each other. The hope was that you would do better than you did the previous year. Business was good, and it didn't.